So obviously, let's talk about them. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Allegheny Northern and N Scale. And today we're going to do a review of ScaleTrain's latest release, the EMD GP30. This is ScaleTrain's first 4-axle diesel released in N Scale. And let's take a look at the details. You're looking at the boxes. Next time you see them, they'll be out of the boxes because we do not do unboxings on this channel. Okay, the GP30 locomotive, now out of the box. It had a very short production range, and that was from summer of 61 to the fall of 63. And you got to remember, in this time period, this was early diesel, and these locomotives were sort of getting updates relatively frequently, different manufacturers putting out different options, and so it kind of went through the sort of computer revolution that we went through in the early 2000s. Yeah, all these locomotives were doing the same sort of thing. So EMD was using this model, this GP30, to combat what GE was doing with their U25Bs. And so 948 of these units were built. Southern was one of the only locomotive requesters, buyers, to ask for the high hood option. And so obviously I have a Southern locomotive here we can take a look at. At this time now, CSX has taken their GP30s that they have inherited, and they have turned them into road slugs. So if you're looking at the CSX right now, you notice that it looks kind of weird, like there's no fans anymore, there's no doors, and we're going to get into that shortly. And then, of course, we have the Union Pacific in the back, and you're going to notice that the trailing unit there is a B unit. So, okay, Union Pacific does not fit on my railroad at all. I'm an Eastern Railroad, so the Southern makes sense with Norfolk Southern that I run. CSX makes sense because I run CSX. Union Pacific doesn't fit into my scheme at all. And you guys know from previous videos that I obviously have a locomotive addiction, and B units and slugs were something that I find interesting because they're not like standard locomotives. And so for the longest time, when they were coming out with all these either fantasy schemes or they were coming out with the heritage schemes, I liked all the locomotives that were not standard run-of-the-mill. So in a given day, I've got a number of trains that I see from just traveling for work, and there's a GEVO, there's a GEVO, there's a GEVO. Oh my God, it gets so boring. Like, yeah, it's a cool locomotive, but after you've seen your 30th GEVO for the day, it's like, I want something different. So my model railroad was always something I could go home to and see a different locomotive instead of seeing GEVOs running all the time. And actually, where I'm at, some of the locals have 30 GB38 rebuilds and some stuff, so I do see some variation, but for the most part, it's the same freaking locomotives all the time. So I liked having some variation on my layout. Problem I had was, got to a certain point where it was like, okay, I have all these specialty locomotives, and I don't have a regular run-of-the-mill CSX locomotive. I don't have a regular run-of-the-mill Norfolk Southern locomotive, so it looked weird. So we balanced that out a little bit, but I'm going back to my roots here, and I'm getting some wild locomotives. So I have the Union Pacific, and it's going to run obviously as probably a local service, and just because it's going to be cool to run the AB set. So this is the first time that I'm aware of in modern production that a B unit has been produced in N scale. So I'm pretty stoked about it. Now what I'm really interested in, and I have not put these on the layout yet, is how they're going to make the road slug sound. And the reason I'm interested in that is because the road slug is a very different unit. Let's talk about that one first. So this version of the GP30, this road slug, which would be a more modern version of the locomotive now for CSX, is known as an RDMT, which is a roadmate slug. Okay, and so what that means is this locomotive cannot run on its own. So you're not going to see this thing in the yard by itself moving stuff around. You're not going to see it doing a local. It needs to be connected to a mother or a lead locomotive. And the reason is because there's no prime mover in here. So that this locomotive has absolutely no way to generate its own electricity to turn the traction motors that are in the trucks. Okay, so what it does is it siphons that power from the mother unit, and that gives this thing its power. Okay, so what they do is they'll typically weight the locomotive a little bit more, gives it a little more tractive effort. So instead of having the motor in there, they'll have steel or concrete, or they'll have some kind of heavy material inside the unit that will add that tractive effort weight back in, but it doesn't generate its own power. So what makes this particular unit a little more interesting is they leave the cab on and they leave the controls in so that you can actually run the train from this unit. So even though there's no motor in it, it's getting its power from its connected unit. It still can be used as a front end unit. So that's just one of the things that CSX did. I see why they would want to do that, just because of the flexibility of being able to run these things, in any part of the train basically, and not have to worry about, oh, we can't, we have to sit behind this thing and let it run in front of us while we're doing maneuvers because, we can't control it. But this allowed CSX to control these. That's pretty cool. And so that's why it's devoid of all the doors. There's no reason to go into the engine compartment because there's no engine. So I'm going to be using this in my coal mine area, and I'm going to be mating it to I have a GP38 CSX that I'm going to probably attach it to. Problem is right now that GP38 has a Digitrax decoder. It does not have a ESU decoder, and they are slightly incompatible in that the ESU decoder is far more advanced. So I have to upgrade that locomotive in order to make this one make sense. So that's going to be an upcoming project, but we've got time because I don't have a coal mine yet. Okay, let's get into the details of the locomotive. So one of the things that absolutely always amazes me about ScaleTrains and some of these other manufacturers who take their time to do their research is that they take their time and they do their research. So when I got these models, the first thing I did was I went to the internet and I looked for photographs of these specific prototypes. And given the age of some of these models and the fact that they're very much gone now in some cases, or have been rebuilt or repainted, or just trying to find this exact locomotive was very difficult in all four cases here. There were some grainy photographs back from, call it back in the day, and those are what I had to go off of. So based on that, I'm going to just tell you up front that all four locomotives appeared to do the original locomotive justice, and I'm sure there's somebody out there that's got better photographs than I had access to. That's like, well, they missed this detail, or this was an inch off in scale, yada yada. Okay, it's fine. Based on the photographs that I see and the grainy details that I see, these locomotives appear to be spot on, and it's difficult to make that claim with 100% authority, just because I don't know exactly from what year and what style that they copied these from. So there might be some variation, and depending on your particular year that you're modeling these things, it might be different, and you might have to make some aftermarket modifications. In my case, that's not going to happen. These are all fine. So the first thing I look at here is the truck detail, and it is very nice. It has all of the small piping detail, the sanders, the hydraulics, everything that you would expect to see from ScaleTrains. You guys are used to that on all of the locomotives. Now, one thing I will tell you, I know I didn't do an unboxing, but when I took these things out of the box, these things arrived kind of in rough condition. Now, the boxes on the outside were fine, but the little padding that they used to protect the guardrails was all over the inside of the box. It wasn't, and it was only on one of them that was actually still behind the rails. And then on this slug, it actually had shifted out of its cradle and was like off to the side. The only casualty of that is this little sander hose right here is kind of bent out at an awkward angle, and I left it that way so you could see it. But that was the only damage on all 4 models. So if you have a ScaleTrains and you've opened up a ScaleTrains box before, you know that these things are in there really, really well. So I don't know what the hell they did to these boxes on the way over. Like I said, there's no outside visible damage, but these things were all over the place on the inside of the box, and thankfully the way that the case is made, it held everything in place. So that's pretty cool. But looking here at the slug, you've got a little bit of a separation here, and I don't know if that's that's just the way it is. So that's a little loose. So if you want to critique that, go on ahead. There is some very fine printing here, but it's all of the detail is very crisp, very clean, and obviously there's no doors here, right? So this one's a little bit. It's good. It's gonna be interesting to weather this just because it's so clean. But I'm gonna try to get this so you can see, hopefully in without the glare there. You can see that they've put the windshield wipers on. There is the labeling, and it doesn't really want to focus on that, but trust me, it's there. We go. You can kind of see that. Okay. And then I want to bring you to the front pilot detail here. Be easier to get this out of the way. So you've got all of your MU hoses, and I did check. These locomotives did not have any kind of snowplow on them, so there's no snowplow detail here. You have your cut levers, separately applied grab bars. That is all over the place. The horn off to the side here. You still have your windshield wiper details, and then I want to bring you up here onto the. You do have this separation here in the cab, this piece, and I'll take a look at that and see if that's something that just needs to be snapped into place or what. But there is a gap here, I noticed. Separately applied details here on the back. You're missing your radiator fans because there's no prime mover, so there's no heat being generated in here that you would need to otherwise vent. And then if we come along to the back here, once again we've got our separately applied grabs, and then your rungs to come up, MU hoses, cut levers, etc. From the photographs that I could find, the model that this is, or the real one that this is modeled off of, this is the current paint scheme for that, so that makes sense. I don't know where this locomotive is right now, if it's still around or not, but from all of the details I could find on the historic photographs, that matches. So by now, I think you guys realize I'm pretty much a detail junkie when it comes to these locomotives. And, I just want to take a look here at the A unit first. And just look at the fine detail here in the trucks. And, just how everything is situated, all the wires, the copper, everything is concealed. Like, you don't see any of the contact strips here. Nothing. It's all tucked up underneath, and ScaleTrains did a fantastic job of hiding that. Which, I mean, it's evident in just about every locomotive that you get. You just see those brass contacts underneath, the wheel wipes. And ScaleTrains has finally come up with a way. You can see it right there. You can see it in the back, and you can see the wire. But when the truck is pushed up against the underframe there, it's completely gone. And you're going to see later here when it's on the layout how much that just totally disappears. You have the see-through fan details, so if you look through there, you can see that there are grates underneath or on top, and then you can see the fan underneath, which is pretty good for N scale. That's usually not something that's modeled. The grills are not see-through like they were on the tunnel motors, and I'll be honest with you, that's a really fine detail that I don't think N scale, it's cool when they do it, but like it's such a small detail that you don't typically see it. But just like the slug, you have all of your separately applied grab irons and rails, and your MU hoses, cut levers, all of that is the same. Don't forget these locomotives are from a basically a bygone era. So you don't have ditch lights and all that sort of stuff on them. You'll have marker lights, but that's pretty much it as far as that goes. And I'm going to be honest with you. Once again, I don't really care about what generation locomotive we're talking about here. It's just they're cool locomotives, and you know, having a B unit. Now they make a freight and a passenger version. So depending on what you want to run, make sure you grab the right B unit and an A unit for that, because there's, like I said, there's different ones, and it's spelled out. So just when you go to make your purchase, make sure you're purchasing the one you intend to use. Otherwise, you won't be prototypical. And if you're going to spend this kind of money on prototype, just take a look there, and you do have. I think you can see it there. There's even a grill over the exhaust. The printing is all fine and very detailed. It's really nice, and I expect that from ScaleTrains. And the truck detail is fantastic. So not only does it cover that copper, but it's just excellent. And the couplers on these locomotives are, ScaleTrains standard, but they are microtrains compatible, and that is very important to me since microtrains is the layout standard. And once again here, high hood on the Southern, and I have found that pretty much the only place to safely hold these locomotives is pretty much the fuel tank. That's the only place where you're not likely to knock something off of them. But zebra stripe on the uh, pilots of the Southern locomotive. It's got the Southern logo there. And I only purchased one of the Southern units because obviously this was quite a collection here all in one time. However, I think it's very easy to see a few more of these Southern units making their way onto the layout. And once again, just fantastic detail, very crisp printing, and all of the molded on details and separately applied details. Everything is just fantastic. It's what you expect from ScaleTrains. Okay, so if you have a ScaleTrains locomotive, you know exactly what that detail looks like. This is no exception. If you don't have a ScaleTrains locomotive, I don't know why you don't have a ScaleTrains locomotive, but you need to get one. And if you start off with this one, I don't think you're going to be disappointed as far as the details go. So, based on the research that I did and what I could find on these locomotives, I'm going to go ahead and just rate right off the rip, tell you 10 out of 10 on the detail. And that includes, just that the packaging snafu that I had with the locomotives kind of bouncing around in there. I don't know what exactly. I've never had that with a ScaleTrains order before, so I don't know. Um, I don't know if it was a little rough seas or what, but whatever it is, there was no damage to the locomotives, and honestly, that is what is most important to me. So some of my videos got deleted, and it kind of sucks. But I wanted to film a quick little ending here for you, and sort of wrap this all up into one little nugget. And I've got to tell you, I've got to hand it to the folks at ScaleTrains. As a consumer, they're not. I'm not sponsored by them. Would love to be. I think their products are fantastic. But so this is coming to you as a consumer, somebody who is paying for these products. So when I do these reviews, I am giving you my honest opinion when I'm reviewing them, because I put out money for them. So if I don't get what I'm expecting, or they don't perform the way I feel they should, I'm going to let you know that, because I don't want you to get in the same position that I was in if I bought something that was subpar. So you can rest assured that when I tell you that I love these locomotives, it's because I do. And so these things run just amazingly well. They ran great out of the box. I did the normal break-in. I gave them an hour forwards, an hour backwards, just really, worked them out a little bit, just put some different cars on them, just had them run around the layout. They looked good. They sounded good. They never lost sound. They stayed on the rails. I didn't have any issues with them hitting any bumps in the track. Now, I have worked out most of the bumps and kinks in my track, so, they shouldn't, but you never know. Like, it's just one of those things. But just a fantastic running locomotive right out of the box. I honestly could have shot, and I think you saw that I shot some of the videos before I even broke them in, and the slow speed action was fantastic. The way they've got the ESU Loc Sound 5 decoder programmed, beautiful, and it's just they're fantastic locomotives. So I can't say enough good things about my initial run with these things. You're going to see them on the layout more and more, and if something would change or they wouldn't hold up, I'll obviously let you know. But right now, out of the box, maybe 4, 5, 6 hours of runtime on them. They are awesome, and they come highly recommended from me. So this slug is probably one of the wildest locomotives I've ever heard the sound on, because it's not a full locomotive, so it doesn't have a prime mover. And every now and then the compressors will go on and off and that sort of thing, but there, you can hear it now. But like, it doesn't have that traditional sound that you would expect from a locomotive. And so when you hit the startup sequence, it literally does nothing because it doesn't have a startup sequence. So it's a very cool model. It's very different. So don't be surprised if you get the slug that, hey, it doesn't make any noise. Well, it does, but you have to do something to make it make noise. So I know that's the concept of the thing, but it's wild to actually hear it or not hear it. So when you flip from forward to backward, you can hear the reverser switch, and you don't actually get sound until you start hearing the traction motors, which is what you would hear from this thing starting. So you don't, you can hear the compressors are on now, but yeah, you don't get any prime mover noises, and it's exactly what I expected it to do, but it's just so wild to hear it actually doing that. So you can hear the traction motors as they kick up and kick down, and it's cool. So it is truly a CSX stealth locomotive, because it doesn't have a motor. All right, I just thought that would amuse everybody. Okay, so I like to keep it real with you guys so you know what I'm doing and where things are at, and get a real good idea from me how these models are performing. And I'm in the middle of the break-in period. This locomotive pair has made a single loop around the layout, and it was a flawless loop. I have no issues with it derailing or stalling or getting hung up or anything like that. And I know I have some areas of my track work we talked about in the update for January that are still a little rough. They're not finalized yet, so track's not glued down. Joints aren't sanded, etc., etc. But this little pair had no issue, no stutters, no problems. Okay, so we're still in the break-in period, and honestly, they have run very smooth. I don't think it's going to require the whole hour break-in period, but we're gonna do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. But they are running very, very, very nice out of the box. Now, there was one issue, and it was with this B unit and with the slug. And what that issue was, a very odd issue, it was tripping the circuit breaker on the auto reversers. Not the main booster, just the auto reverser. And I could tell it was tripping it because the turnout kept opening and closing, which is, an automatic feature of those auto reversers. And there's no loose wires, there were no loose connections, and it was only one of the loops. It wasn't both loops. So I thought, okay, well, maybe there's something wrong with, there's a loose wire or something, and when the locomotive turns its trucks, that wire's touching something. No, that wasn't the case. So I thought, well, maybe the board is just too sensitive. And this locomotive just ran through the board, controlled track, no issue. Okay, so wasn't that. So what I've concluded, and it's the only thing that not really makes sense, because it was not tripping out the main board, the main booster in the command station or the booster. So it wasn't tripping those out. It was just tripping out the ultra sensitive little flipping board, reversing board, I guess. And what I think was happening was that unit may have been a little tight from the factory and may not have, might have been drawing a little more amps, with like the back EMF and everything else. I think it may have been drawing a little more amps, and that thing was reading it as a short, and then the short trips the switch to turn. And the only thing I can conclude is that's what it was, because now that it's running and it's running smooth and it's not, there's no issue with it, didn't have any problem going through the turnout. So I'm not sure exactly what that was all about. That is my best guess based on my understanding of mechanics and power draw. So I think we were drawing a little bit too much and it was reading it as a short. And now that problem is resolved and the motor's running the way it's supposed to, it's back in range and it's not tripping. So if you have a locomotive that does that in an AR section, just let it run for a little while and see if that fixes your issue. Okay, I do owe you a coupler check. So we are mounted at the correct height, and of course the ScaleTrains couplers are compatible with the ScaleTrains couplers, which is always a plus for me. If you are not using ScaleTrains couplers, I honestly don't know what you're using, because that's pretty much like the standard, but these will couple to that. The only thing they don't couple to is the Kato ones, but nothing couples to Kato, so we just sort of write them off. But you saw that was a good height there. I'll check one more just to be sure, but in the break-in period I did not have any of the locomotives catch their trip pins or anything, so I think we're going to be fine. That one's actually riding a little low. Kind of looked low, that's why I picked this one. I wanted to see if it actually was. And that one's running a little low. It still clears, but it's kind of pointing downward, so that might be an issue. We're going to check that out. And the back side here is spot on. So let's see here. This is the one that got shifted in the box. And actually, you know what? Just looking under here, it doesn't look like the screw's in all the way. Let me see if I can fix that right now. It's still sitting a little tiny bit low. I think in transit it might have had the shank bent just a little bit. It looks like I pretty much got it back in line. That's pretty close. We'll make sure that's not an issue, but it looks like we're in gauge for the most part, so that'll be good. We'll go ahead and let's do a pull test. Okay, so I am going to kind of sort of do some unfair things here, and I am going to put 7 ScaleTrains cars behind 1 GP30, and then I'm going to bring it up the steepest grade on the main line at about 30% throttle. And why I say that's unfair and some silly things is because I don't expect this locomotive to be able to pull that, because a GP or an SD40-2 which is bigger and heavier, could not pull that same load. So I think this is a silly test, but I just want to do it just because I have them, and let's see what happens. So there we are at 30% throttle, and I've got 7 cars. Yeah, he can't pull that. Okay, that was silly. I knew that. Let's go down to 4 and let him take off with 4. And I know there's stuff everywhere. I'm working on stuff everywhere. So I definitely have to get a sort of a stand built up that I can you know, actually check my grades and like say, okay, it's going up a 2% grade, it's going up a 1% grade, it's going through this kind of curve, that kind of curve. Right now, I don't know what it's doing. It's just going up the hill. I just know this is the steepest grade on the layout, and it can handle 4, 50, 60-foot cars, no issue. So, okay, that's pretty average at that point. Now, here's something I will tell you that I've noticed, and it's just, all right, so 4 cars is not a problem. What is a problem is I keep forgetting I'm on the left throttle, not the right throttle. And so I keep moving another train that's somewhere across the layout. Okay, let's bring him back. And I'm not going to put this auto rack on here because that's a big car. Let's put on the let's put on 2 of the finger flats. And see what that does. Okay, we are at 6 scale trains. Oh, no, we're not. We're back at 4 because I dropped the 2 off. Hold on a second here. Let's try this again. Conductor did not make sure we had a good couple before we took off. All right. Six cars, all the same size, heading up the grade. Kind of unfair because I did stop it on the grade, but let's see what you do. Still trying. Still trying. Hasn't stalled yet. Okay, so as our little GP30 crests the hill here, 6 cars is pretty much, that's like the standard. So for a little locomotive, it was able to pull the exact same thing the GP40-2 does. So that's a decent pull for me. Now I know you're saying, well, 6 cars is not a lot. No, it's not. That's a steep grade. But if you recall from the old layout on that measured 2% grade, 6 or 7 cars was usually where these things sort of bottomed out. So it's on par with all the other locomotives that are sound equipped. Yes, your old Atlas, not the sound Atlas, but the old Atlas will pull more. Yes, your Katos without the sound will pull more. So I'm comparing apples to apples. So among all the scale trains, all of the Atlas with sound, this locomotive is pulling in the same weight. And I just want to show you it crawling here up the hill. And it's not crawling because it's struggling. It's crawling because I have it at 8% throttle. So if you're wondering about slow speed operation, it does have slow speed operation.